Third part. Dee advanced through the forest on foot.
Well, you went and lost our means of transport, you big dope. You're handsome and all, but you're kind of lacking. What are we supposed to do when you put down the servant but let the boss get away? At this rate, we could keep going for a century and still not get out of the forest. I hold you responsible.
The hoarse voice grumbled a litany of complaints from the vicinity of the hunter's hip, but after a while it seemed to be crushed. A shriek of pain rang out, and it grew quiet. However, it seemed to keep remembering, returning time and again with more gloom and doom. As they were going on through a succession of trees and grass that seemed to know no end, they'd encountered two of the enemy. Battling the master of the light spear eyes, Dee had deflected the beams back at him with the blade of his sword and narrowly managed to stab the nobleman through the heart. But the other one had escaped. In part that was the fault of the cyborg horse, which had been pierced through the barrel by the light spear eyes. But aside from Dee and one other, no one knew that the hunter had miraculously permitted the escape.
Ever since you announced we were going over to the island, I've had a bad feeling. Duchess Mizuki Dandorian. Now there's an accursed name. Especially where you're concerned.
Duchess, what about the Duke? Dee asked. Perhaps it was on account of the fog that still clung to him, and that his steely voice seemed to waver just a bit.
You really don't remember, do you?
The hoarse voice asked back in a stunned tone.
Out of all your bloody battles, that's the one fight pulled out of your memories, eh? Maybe it's a spell the Duke put on you out of jealousy. Or it could be just simple amnesia. No, if it were amnesia, it'd have to mean you know who. Now listen good. To Duchess Dandorian, you were...
Fist still balled tightly. Dee hastened his pace. It was strange the way this walk went. Out of the grass came snakes and insects and other creatures of indeterminate nature, and they followed along behind Dee. Along them were a number of species that could clearly move much faster than a person could walk. Nevertheless, they didn't catch up to Dee. The hunter's gait was, to all appearances, just at normal speed. He didn't run at all. Yet those that followed him only fell farther and farther behind. Before long, all those in his wake had been lost, and Dee suddenly halted. About 10 yards up ahead, there stood a young woman wearing a deep purple dress. Her face was so lovely any man would be paralyzed at the first sight of her, and she cast a faint shadow in the dappled sunlight. From the hunter's loosening fist, the hoarse voice jeered.
There, you see that? You might have forgotten, but she hasn't. My. She got away once and came back for more.
Dee, the woman said. Not with her voice. Her lips merely trembled. I've been waiting for you. Will you not turn around and leave now? I'm here on business. Once it's settled, I'll leave. Once upon a time, I was slain by you, along with my husband. Would you do so again? Over and over. The hunter replied, as long as you keep coming back. That's my job. The wind swept across the woman's lovely visage. It was colored with grief. And once more it blew. It was seething with hatred. If that is the case, she said, I won't be reduced to a dust a second time. I shall stop you and avert that fate. Dee bounded, cutting the woman from the top of her head down to the crotch. What resistance the blade met traveled up it to his shoulder. There was no woman.
An illusion. But you probably knew that.
The left hand said, not bothering to sheathe his blade. Dee spun to his right. The wind howled, and another wind collided with it. And where they met, sparks shot out. Dee's sword had locked together with another blade. The man in the ash-gray cape had bandages all over his face and hands. And the bandages were dirty, soaked with blood and pus.
The Duke.
The left hand groaned.
Watch yourself. A man crazy with jealousy is a force to be reckoned with. But what a great couple they make, coming back to life together and everything.
The two men leapt apart, and amidst pale blue streaks of light they changed their stances and the positions of their swords. The man, the Duke, brought his sword far to the right, and for some reason he put his left palm out in front of his face. On the other side, Dee lowered the tip of his sword until it nearly scraped the ground, and turned the blade ever so slightly to the left. "We meet again, Dee," the Duke said in a voice like that of a ghost groaning from the depths of the earth. "When the island was restored, I wished to remain sleeping, because I only wanted to forget everything. However, the revival project took no pity on me. Once again I saw my wife, and now I have encountered you. Oh, how I curse you, sacred ancestor. Being torn apart mentally and physically just once was more than enough for me." The Duke sounded as if blood were about to gush from his mouth, or rather, that his words were plastered with gore, with the bright blood that gushed from his soul. It was that tone that kept Dee standing still. However, the body beneath those bandages and that cape was terribly weak, and his voice was thin and broken. He was in absolutely no condition to square off against Dee.
You think he's unmanly, do you?
The hoarse voice said, and even it carried a morose tone.
That's a cry from his very soul. Dee, he was destroyed by your hand, and for all his pain he might have found peace in death. Yet the woman told him how she felt about you, and as if to end his own life, he challenged you and was destroyed. Noted today is a gift to him from the Lord, and this time, be sure to nail his coffin shut.
Dee didn't move, nor did the Duke. Each of them carried the ghost of a lovely woman on his back. Perhaps it was her hand that nudged Dee forward. The hunter's feet kicked off the ground ferociously, and the leap was timed perfectly so that the second Dee touched down again, his sword lashed out with a weight and keenness that surely should have sliced the Duke's head in two. However, his blade cut empty air, and Dee staggered. Dee's eyes were trained on the open palm of the Duke's hand. On his palm alone pale flesh was exposed, and an eye had been scribed there with black lines. Its pupil was blazing red. It was unclear whether or not Dee noticed that. For an instant, his own staggering form burned there. The Duke closed his hand into a fist. "As you can see, I suffer from an illness. When I first did battle with you, it had already gnawed me down to the bone. There are afflictions that even the full power of the nobility's knowledge cannot cure. I was still suffering from it when I was destroyed. When I was resurrected of late, I was asked what should be done about my affliction. A cure was possible. However, if it were to remain, I would be given another power, the power to triumph over Dee. I chose the latter without hesitation." The Duke opened his left hand. Dee was still reflected in the eye scribed there. "Just now, I have taken in everything about you. With this, I shall know your location no matter where you go, and I shall see your actions, and like so, I can also prevent them. He moved his left hand as if beckoning to Dee. Come, the Duke said. Come to me. Dee stood there with his sword aimed at his opponent's eye, but his body shook for an instant, as if fighting some unseen force. Come. Dee's right foot took a step forward.
This can't.
The hoarse voice began, surprise suffusing its tone. Come. Dee started to take a second step, but managed to stop himself. I should expect no less from the man who slew me. But how about this? The Duke called back his right hand. Drawn by invisible strings, Dee stepped forward, and the Duke's sword pressed into the base of the hunter's neck. Fresh blood stained the sun-dappled air. Chapter 5, End.